All right, let's dive into a story that's, well, it's pretty powerful. It's all about memory, trauma, and how fear can just completely take over a life. It all kicks off with one man, a devastating loss, and this one quote that'll just stick with you.
So, that's our narrator, the seventh man, setting the scene. He's talking about a wave, right? But this is no ordinary wave. As you're about to see, this was the event that literally split his life in two, a before and an after. And it trapped him in this living nightmare for, get this, 40 years.
Picture this. The seventh man is telling his story to a small group late at night. He's in his mid-50s, he's got this deep scar near his eye, and you can just tell from his expression that he's been wrestling with how to say all this for a very long time. But tonight, he's ready. And he's really clear right from the get-go. Yeah, his story is about a real physical wave, but it's also about something we can all relate to. He even says, "There's no way for me to tell, of course, what it will be for each of you." So he's basically inviting all of us to look at his tragedy and think about, well, how we deal with our own biggest fears.
Okay, to really get the weight of this loss, we've got to rewind. We're going back to his childhood, growing up in a little seaside town. This is the happy before, you know? The world before the wave came and just washed it all away. In that world, it pretty much revolved around one person, his best friend, Kay.
Now, these two weren't just buddies. The narrator says they were like brothers. It was this perfect dynamic. Our narrator was the big, strong protector, and Kay was this quiet, gentle kid who needed someone looking out for him. Just this really balanced, sweet friendship.
And Kay he was such an interesting kid. Physically, he was pretty frail, had a speech impediment, but you put a paintbrush in his hand, whoa, absolute genius. He just saw the world differently, especially the sea he loved so much. And honestly, this gentle, artistic soul, he's really the heart of this entire story.
And then, it all changed. One September, this monster typhoon barrels into their town. And after all the wind and the rain, this really weird, eerie calm falls over everything. They're in the eye of the storm. And for a couple of kids, this is awesome. It's an adventure, a chance to go explore. So they head down to the beach, and the scene is just surreal. The water's pulled way, way out, and our narrator, he gets this gut feeling that something is deeply wrong. You know that primal, instinctual fear? That's what hits him. He screams for Kay, but Kay's just in his own little world, looking at something on the sand. Then, a rumble. And this terror just takes over the narrator's body, and he just runs. He runs for the breakwater, leaving his friend behind. He turns back just in time to see this monstrous wave, as tall as a building, just swallow Kay whole. Just like that. In a split second, the world is just wiped clean. Kay's gone. His little white dog is gone. Everything. The wave pulls back, and there's just silence, an empty beach. But the horror, oh, it's not over. There's a second wave coming. He's just frozen, watching this second wave, even bigger than the first, roll in. But it doesn't just crash, it almost seems to hover. And inside it, like he's trapped in glass, he sees Kay. But it's not the Kay he knew. This Kay has this awful wide grin on his face, and his arm is stretched out, like he's trying to pull the narrator in with him. And that image, that's the one that's going to haunt him. That's his prison. He just collapses, wakes up days later, sick with a raging fever. He gets better physically, sure, but the psychological damage, it's deep and it's permanent. The trauma from that one day sends him running into this self-imposed exile that's going to last for 4 decades.
I mean, think about it. This one event just bleeds into every single part of his life. He's drowning in survivor's guilt, absolutely convinced he could have saved Kay if he just tried. That guilt turns into these horrible, recurring nightmares where Kay is pulling him under the water. His fear grows from the sea to pools, rivers, any body of water. He can't even form close relationships or get married because he's terrified his own screams in the night will scare someone away.
So his life is literally split in two. He runs away from his hometown, moves to a village up in the mountains, as far from the sea as he can possibly get. The boy who was always the protector becomes a man just haunted by the one time he couldn't protect his friend. The kid who loved swimming becomes a man who's terrified of a puddle. His entire life just becomes about one thing, avoidance. 40 years. Just let that sink in for a second. That's more than half a lifetime spent running from one memory, from one single moment of paralyzing fear. Yeah, he goes on, he gets a job, he builds some kind of life, but it's all lived in the shadow of that wave.
But then, after all that time, something finally starts to shift. His father passes away, and his brother sends him a box of stuff from their childhood. And inside that box, he finds a bundle of Kay's old watercolor paintings.
In finding these paintings, it forces him to finally look at the past he's been running from for so long. As he looks at this art, he's not seeing some monster from his nightmares. He's seeing the gentle, pure-hearted kid he actually knew. He remembers their friendship, and it leads to this massive, life-changing epiphany.
This right here, this is the key that finally unlocks that 40-year prison he's been in. He realizes that the awful, hateful grin he saw on the wave, it wasn't never Kay. It was his own terror, reflected back at him. The monster wasn't in the water. The monster was inside of him all along. And in that moment, he knows. He knows exactly what he has to do.
So he gets on a train and he goes back to the town he ran from, back to the very beach where his life was completely shattered. The town's different, sure, but the sea is exactly the same. And he doesn't even hesitate. He walks right down to the shore and straight into the water, letting the waves wash over his feet. And in that moment, poof, 40 years of darkness, of guilt, of fear, it all just vanishes. The same water that took his friend now feels like it's welcoming him home, and he's not afraid anymore.
And the change is just immediate. It's profound. The nightmares, they stop. He doesn't feel bitter about the lost years. Instead, he feels this incredible gratitude that he was saved, even so late in life. And now, in his 50s, he feels like he can finally actually start to live. And this brings us to his final message, right? The big lesson he learned from a lifetime on the run. He says that fear, yeah, it's real and it's powerful. But the real danger, the most frightening thing you can do, is turn your back on it. Because when you do that, you're taking the most precious part of yourself and just surrendering it to the thing you're afraid of. For him, that something else was the wave. Which, leaves us with one last pretty powerful question. The seventh man's fear looked like a giant wave. It chased him for 40 years until he finally found the courage to turn around and face it. So his story kind of asks us to look at our own lives and think, what's the thing we've been running from? What's our wave?